Okay, best of luck. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be. Welcome back to the Fastly YouTube channel for the 12th installment of Fastly Developers Live. Now, just like last time, I am back with Brooks Cunningham, Security Strategist here at Fastly, and he's going to be telling us today all about the brand new bot management product that Fastly offers, which allows you to identify bots, good or bad, observe them, and also protect your web application from them. So welcome back to the stream, Brooks.
It's great to be here. Thank you for the introduction. Hey, everybody. Happy Friday, most importantly. But yeah, I'm super excited to talk about how we can detect, really, at least I'll focus on credential stuffing here and to give you better visibility into that type of attack. And then most importantly for folks, how do you actually mitigate these types of attacks? So with that said, can folks see my screen? Yeah.
They can now.
Awesome. All right, so I'll first just talk about the initial thing that we'd love to talk about and do as part of setting up a customer's existing configuration is we just want to give people visibility into their traffic. And so I'm just right into the site right now, and I've already kicked off a credential stuffing attack, something to simulate that, actually using some of the Fastly infrastructure. So I'm super excited about that. But I can see that we have a large spike of requests. I've done in the past when I was setting up some of this environment, but also have some quite a bit of traffic coming in right now as well. And so if I refresh this, I should see, yeah, here's a pretty good spike in traffic. And what we do is we can actually allow you to click and drag into specific time series to get better visibility into specific time series data. Now, what a lot of customers have challenges with is identifying the login or authentication endpoints that they actually need to protect. Because a lot of web application administrators, they inherit applications that they're protecting. And so what we would like to do a lot of times is just give people the ability to discover what those login or authentication related endpoints are. And we do that through templated rules, specifically one for login discovery. And templated rules are really a guided approach to help you configure your environment in an optimal way. And so let's just go to that login discovery templated rule here. And the first thing that I'm going to do is click configure, and I'm just going to enable it, and then I'll talk through it. So what this rule does is it's just looking for any requests that match up with the path/auth or login. But we're also able to inspect some of the post parameters as well. So if certain parameters exist with email, password, or username, then we can immediately tag or add a signal to those requests so that we can identify that potentially this is something that's authentication related. So this way it's much, much easier to find out which traffic you actually want to protect. And so if we take a quick look, I enabled this right before. So there were a couple of rules requests that we did see that were identified with that login discovery. And so if we just take a quick peek here, we can see that there's definitely something that's matching up with that signal, that criteria for that rule. And it is being identified with that login discovery signal. And so this is a really easy way to just help you discover what those things are that you should be protecting, because it might not be immediately obvious. You might have not as thorough of documentation internally, and that's okay. We want to give people the tools to help find out the things that they need to protect. So once we actually have visibility into the traffic that we want to protect, the next thing we can do is configure some of these login attempt, login failure, and login success. It can be really powerful to understand some of the ebbs and flows, especially some of the ratios potentially that you see with login attempts and login successes. So I've already filled out a little bit of this to make it a little bit easier for this webinar. But essentially just saying, if the request and it's a post to this specific endpoint and it does use some of the wildcard syntax, then we want to add an additional signal login attempt. And we can even go a step further to take an additional action. So if we see, for example, 10 login attempts with that signal within a minute, then we can add a flag to the IP address and we can just sample those. Or we can block all subsequent IPs from that IP address. And a lot of the templated rules are really just based on IP address for rate limiting. And we'll get into how you can actually take an action potentially on more distributed traffic as well if you're seeing abuse from those cases. But I'm going to click update here. And I want to really do the same thing for login success and login failure. So with login failure, I know with my application, there's a 401 that gets returned back when it's a login failure attempt. So it's really straightforward here. But if there's other criteria that really designate if it's a failure, you have the option to configure that as well based off a certain header or if there's a certain value associated with that header as well. It does say content type here, something that you can fill in, but a lot of cases you might see something like location if it redirects to a specific part, if it's either login success or login failure. But we'll go ahead and enable these as well. I'm going to do the same thing with login success. So with a successful authentication attempt on my application, I know that's going to return back a 200 OK. And similar settings here. So if there's 5 successful login attempts within 10 minutes, really just going to flag those IPs. And really, when you're having credential stuffing attack, now I want to say that the failed logins are interesting, and they can be. But the things that are really, really interesting are the spikes in the successful login attempts. And so we do provide a mechanism so that you can do some additional forensics, additional analysis on those successful login attempts when those spikes do occur. So that way, if you need to take some type of action, such as a password reset or lock a customer's account, just think about if you're a financial institution or if it's a customer account, your e-commerce, and there's a lot of already loaded gift cards on an account. You want to make sure that somebody that's a fraudster can't go in and start purchasing lots of things or doing a funds transfer immediately from those accounts. If you can, to mitigate fraud and protect customers, you want to be able to lock those accounts down to prevent that type of fraud to occur on those accounts. I'll pause right now because I know I went pretty quickly through some of the login discovery, attempt, failure, and success. Kalen, any questions from the audience?
No, but that is a great opportunity for me to let the people watching know that if you have any questions or just comments that you want to make about this, please do let us know in the chat. We are watching it. We're very happy to answer any questions you may have or just say hello. That's the beauty of doing it live.
It is. Yeah. Again, happy Friday, folks.
Oh, yeah, it is Friday, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And so as pretty soon we'll be able to start seeing some of these requests getting decorated with the request. Now, Kalen, I'm going to surprise you here. We didn't talk about this, but from an attacker perspective, this is the thing that I'm going to be interested in. So I am executing this actually from log tailing. And so what I can see from here is when my attack tooling is actually just reporting in a successful login attempt. And I'm just logging out the successful username and password combinations. I'm using very, very bad passwords here, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll see a really cool thing actually within our UI and how we're even decorating requests even further when a user is using a very, very weak password. And so
if I may, I just want to quickly expand on that. For those who may not have watched our previous streams where we worked with compute, what Brooks has just shown there is a Fastly compute service that is sending a bunch of requests to this WAF instance that are emulating an attack, essentially. And the logs that you are seeing on his screen there were brought to you by our log tailing product, which allows you to see logs from the network worldwide streamed into your terminal or your browser.
Fantastic. And so now I can start seeing a number of these login attempts, login failure, login success, and of course that login discovery as well. So if we just take a quick look here, we can get the request at a glance. But we can also jump into a full search as well if we want to see a number of the requests or filter on specific tags. So let me do that here. And here's that dashboard here. And so I can see it's page name, 1 out of 100, but there's about, almost 5,500 requests that I could parse through within here. So since I am using a very, very weak password for these login attempts, think about if somebody just gets one of these databases from a database leak. You could then spray a whole bunch of usernames with these combo lists, breach username password combinations, to see if you get any hits across given websites. And chances are, all the attacker is looking for, if they get a 1% hit rate on successful authentication attempts, that's fantastic from their perspective. And so this gives you additional intelligence and context as far as what type of attack potentially you may be experiencing. This specific signal, compromised password, is an internal preview at this moment, but we're excited to hope make it a beta in the future. But a number of the other signals, they're currently available. So now that we have some visibility, and potentially we could even take action on a given IP address when the requests are when the request exceeds certain thresholds, but I want to take a little bit different approach. And I want to use our bot management product to actually just start challenging some of this, because the requests are coming from the Fastly infrastructure. It's effectively just, think of it like curl or Python request library. It's just some type of command line tooling to spray these credentials. What I'm going to do now is enforce a challenge. So I'll go to site rules. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and configure a few different rules. I'm going to configure that browser challenge on the get. I'm going to configure the verify token on the post. And then I'm going to configure a block when the challenge token is not valid. So let's go ahead and do that. So all I have to do is I'll go ahead and enable these and we'll talk through them. And this one here as well. So starting with the one at the bottom. So if the request goes to formlogin.html and it's a get, return back an interstitial page, a browser challenge. And so what does that actually look like? So if we go back to some of the requests, then I can show you what just an interstitial page actually looks like. So just click onto this so that I can copy.
Being able to see all of those requests would have been really helpful yesterday when we were looking into an issue with one of our websites. We had some malformed requests coming in that were throwing loads of errors on our compute service. And being able to see exactly which requests were coming in and filter them in that way would have been incredibly helpful. I think we may need to look into using the next generation WAF ourselves for the documentation website.
It really can be a big help for like just application troubleshooting as well. And a lot of our customers do use it in that way. It doesn't just need to necessarily exclusively be used for security purposes, although that is what it's designed for. A lot of folks do use it for application debugging as well. And so here I have this, I use this site for a lot of testing. Really the back end is just http://me.edgecompute.app. But it works for a lot of security testing as well, especially with a number of the utilities that we have built in. And so on this one, if we just take an example here, I'll do challenge.js. I'm just adding this query parameter challenge.js so that you can get a sense of, let's go back here, what these challenges actually look like. So in this case, anywhere the query parameter is challenge.js, just do a browser challenge. And this is going to be a non-interactive challenge. So there's going to be an interstitial page that'll pop up, fingerprints my client, and then I'll have a cookie set and I can prove that, yes, I have a valid challenge token. So going back there, I'm going to fill out some information and then I click submit for my pizza order. Actually, whoops, I was supposed to refresh it. challenge.js, verifying my browser. I'm doing a browser proof of work, doing a postback, getting a cookie set. And now when I submit some information, I should be able to see that I have that valid challenge token. And fantastic, I do. So great. And so we can take that. That's an example of the client challenge with a non-interactive challenge, but we also have the ability to capture folks and capture clients. And so what does that look like? First need to clear out my browser cookie here. So let me do that. And then if I do challenge captcha, I'll keep that tab open there. It's going to fire on this rule, which operates in a very similar way. So if that query parameter has the challenge captcha, and it's then returned back that challenge captcha. So I do that one more time. Maybe I misspelled something. We'll see. Okay, fantastic. So now I can see that I get a captcha. Oh boy, I think that's an R and not a T. Yellen, what do you think?
I'm with you there. Yeah, that's looking like a lowercase r.
Okay, all right, just making sure. All right, so long as I can prove that I'm not a robot, which seems to get harder and harder every day. Click submit. Fantastic. I submit some information, and this application is just returning back the information that I'm sending to it. So it's a really good utility to actually know what my client is sending to the web server, but also what Fastly is adding in the request as well. So if I want to further decorate some requests with some additional headers or additional information, then I can really, really easily see that using this utility here. And I can see, yep, there's that cookie, and fantastic. So I've shown you what the challenges look like, the interactive and non-interactive, the CAPTCHA and JavaScript challenge, respectively. So what does this stuff mean from an attacker perspective? Well, I have some good news. If I actually go back to my terminal here, it's just saying doing credential stuff. It's been like that for a bit. I don't have any successful authentication attempts like I previously did. So what the heck? My attack's no longer working like it previously was. So if I scroll up back in my terminal, previously I was seeing some of these attacks being successful, but now as we go to the bottom, it's just saying it's doing credential stuffing. It's not actually successful anymore. So what's going on? If we go back to here, and then let's go back to the UI, I can now see, I'll filter on just the past hour, make this a bit easier. You can still see, yeah, there's a number of login attempts, failures, successes, and discoveries. At least the successes have started to drop quite a bit, which is a good thing because I don't want my credential stuffing attack tooling to be successful. But if I go to the request view, which I think I've got here, yeah, and I just want to go into the past 15 minutes. It's worth noting that the information here is ordered from latest to oldest. So as you're trying to parse through some of these request view, it's really easy to see some of that, the latest data. And what I can see here is that these requests are being blocked just based off of the details within here. And what I really, really like, kind of what Kalen was talking about earlier, if you're trying to debug and try to get additional context, like what's happening within a request, it's really easy. Just go into these view request details here. And so I can see a ton of information about the request, including JA3 fingerprint, which we'll get to in a minute, but also the request headers, a lot of good information within there, some of the response details. And then we can see the signals as well. And if I wanted to see the rule that actually blocked the request, oh, looks like Kalen, you got a question. Go for it.
I do actually. Just with you saying that you can, of course, view the details of the request. There are some things in requests that I wouldn't necessarily want logged in plain text to appear on this dashboard. How can we prevent things like passwords and such appearing here?
Great question. So by default, we do a number of redactions. A really common redaction that we do is with the cookie header. And so we at Fastly do not want to log sensitive information so much as we can help it. So we redact quite a bit of information by default. There's certain values or certain header names that we look for in a certain pattern. If we see those patterns, we just automatically will label the value of that field as redacted before it even hits our logging pipeline in our console here. But whether there's certain post parameter fields we look at, there's certain request headers that we look at. But if there are these sensitive fields, we don't want them in the logs just as much as you don't want them in our logs.
That's great. I mean, is there a way to also add custom fields to be redacted?
Absolutely. So we do have a mechanism here under redactions. And so I'll just pull that up actually really quick. And there's a lot of ways to just add your own redactions, either on the request parameter, request header, and even on response headers as well. So you can have sensitive information in the response headers. Think about that set cookie header that might be coming back from your origin server. If it potentially is going to have some authentication related information, you don't want us to have that. I believe we actually redact set cookie by default, but if there was other similar headers, you could redact those as well.
Great. So you don't have to have some kind of cookie cutter application. You can just configure it however you need.
And that's one of the beautiful things actually about our WAF as well, is that it's very minimal, typical initial requirement especially. And so you don't have to go in and do tons of configuration initially. We try to make it a really light lift. And you can, to get to some initial baseline protection. And then as folks want to tailor the protection for their specific application, I mean, for sure, that's where redactions, request rules, and rate limiting exist for.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Please continue.
Can do. So back in the request view here, yes. So if I want to see what rule actually did the block, it's easy. All I have to do, click this view rule here, and it's going to take me to it. And here's that rule that we configured earlier, where if the path contains login and the signal exists where that challenge token is invalid, then take the action, which is block. So it's just easy to see some of that workflow there. And the reason why that challenge token is invalid is that the cookie is not present, because in my the tooling that I built, I'm not actually sending that cookie. So that's generally that workflow here. And so these requests are now being mitigated and blocked using the configuration that we built out. But what's cool is the real user workflow. Let's see, so I'm going to clear out my cookie here. So as soon as I click this, I should actually get that interstitial page. Fantastic, I do. And this is something that a normal user would experience. And this gives me the opportunity to set that cookie, which I've done here. And I can send my username, and I will send just a real random long password so I don't get that compromised password check. And fantastic, I'm allowed through, and I can see that there's quite a bit of information we're actually sending to the origin as well. Login discovery, login attempt, and that challenge token is valid as well, just in the tag. So if you wanted to use some of this information at your origin server, you definitely could to further enrich some of those requests and get some of those details. As an example, I actually do here. So if I just send a very, very weak password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I can now see that this compromised password is also added to the tags. So there's definitely things you could do with the origin server for some additional logic, or if you had things kind of daisy chained with compute even behind next-gen WAF, you could potentially do some things with that to enact some workflows to lock a user's account, force a password reset, other creative things to prevent fraudsters potentially from doing some type of fraud, especially if it was a successful login attempt. So the next thing I think the last thing that I have here is actually talking about JA3. But with any other, Caleb, go.
Yes, I have a question again. So of course, what you were showing there, you had the either the capture where you have to kind of identify the letters in the image. You also showed one where there was a proof of work challenge, I believe, where the browser has to run some code to basically show that it's a legitimate user, because doing that at scale would not be worth it. But there is another solution out there that Fastly is actually a part of in the general ecosystem. I'm talking about private access tokens, which allow devices to prove who they are by being signed by the manufacturer that produces the device, say Apple or Google. Is that something that's supported by the next gen WAF as a challenge?
It's very much so something that we're looking forward to as far as to incorporate and make that an easy toggle to configure within the UI and to make that an additional challenge. So not today, but something we're definitely looking forward to having in the future.
Great. And I imagine that you could integrate with a compute service that perhaps did that challenge for you. Because we have a blog post up about how you can use private access tokens to protect the compute service. So I imagine actually you could have that pipe some data into the WAF to send users to the right place for that. I can't wait to see that as a toggle built in natively. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, we would just want to make it easy for folks. I mean, compute is awesome. We love it. And for the folks that maybe are a little bit less developer savvy, which is okay, we want to make that drop down available for folks to make it easy.
Fantastic.
All right. And were there any other questions?
No other questions.
All
Although
right.
if you have any questions in the chat, viewers, please pop them there. We would love to speak to you.
So I did say I'd mention JA3 as well. So if we take a look at, let's go to the dashboard here. And actually, I'll go to the request view. So what I can see is I can easily filter on things like the JA3 as well. So if I just click this, it'll easily bring up this signature here. And this will filter on all the requests that we're logging that match up with that TLS fingerprint. And so JA3 is a TLS fingerprint. It's based off of that client hello message. And there's some math that happens that essentially generates this string as a result. And this helps to identify potentially more distributed types of traffic. So command line tooling such as curl, Python requests, they're typically going to have a similar JA3 fingerprint. And from what I've seen from the Fast infrastructure, requests coming from the Fastly Edge are going to have a similar TLS fingerprint as well. So if I wanted to take an action on just this JA3 fingerprint, all I have to do, request rule. I'm actually just going to copy this one. And then there's a whole bunch of options that you have available here. Essentially anything within the request or the response you can take an action on. But the thing that I'm interested in for this particular item is just take an action on the JA3. All I have to do here, paste, and then I can just block that. But you don't just have to block requests within the Fastly Next Gen WAF. You can absolutely just decorate requests with signaling, such as for example, right here. And so if I want to just add, a signal that said like Fastly JA3, all I have to do is just add the signal Fastly JA3. And give a description if you want as well. Great signal. And then I would enable it. And for this, I'll actually just delete that. I'll just add that signal. And then in a moment,
I'm sorry. I'm curious. Go ahead. Obviously, you knew that was the JA3 for requests from the Fastly Edge because all of your requests are coming from the Fastly Edge currently. But say that my website's under attack and I log into the dashboard and I want to identify where the majority of requests are coming from. Is there some kind of way to break down like the request by JA3 or find the most popular one?
So within this UI, I would really encourage folks to actually just stream hour logs to their scene, because there's for sure certain things that you can search for and filter on, and you can search within here. So for example, if I just replace this E with a 1, which won't exist, no request found. You could do it kind of manually like that. But if you're trying to like find out, like, hey, what are the top 10 JA3 signatures? Or what are certain J3 signatures coming from a certain IP address or IP range or certain data centers? I would really encourage folks to leverage their existing scene, because chances are, I mean, if you're using Splunk or some Elk Stack or any number of other vendors out there, like you're going to have a lot of those queries kind of pre-built a lot of times, and I would utilize that. If you're looking for something really quick and easy to search for, like our UI is really good for that. And you can do definitely some analysis within there, but your SIEM is going to have a lot more instrumentation and kind of visibility for that type of granular analysis. So that's where I would typically try to steer folks to.
Sure. So to be clear, you can actually stream logs from the WAF into other log providers, just like you can with a Fastly VCL or compute service.
Yeah, so it uses that same mechanism. So if you're already taking advantage of that Fastly log streaming, then you can get visibility into the signals that we're adding into the request, just by making a few minor updates to the existing VCL configuration that you have.
That's fantastic. I didn't know that. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And so let's see and if you're trying to get visibility into all the signals, let's see, this one does, we can go to signals dashboard. And then let's go to Fastly J3. So we can get visibility into all of the signals across the site here. And I can already see there's a number of requests being flagged with that Fastly J3. And I might have to actually, let's see, I might be eating my hat a little bit, Kalen. So we do have a mechanism to filter on some of those requests by source. So if you want to see some of them for this particular signature, you could. So if a JA3 potentially was present, then here's a way to kind of filter on some of those sources. But I would still generally encourage folks to take a look at their SIEM for a lot more in-depth analysis. But yep, here we can see by target, by source for that particular signal, by source, by target, and by target and source. So it's a really cool way to be able to get some visibility into where the signal is being added.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I know that it's really easy to defend from an attack when you know where it's coming from or a specific property of the attacking clients. But actually, half the challenge is just figuring out where it's all coming from. So having a dashboard like that where you can see by count, which parameters are the same, that's really helpful.
Yep. And a lot of this information here is typically going to be sampled information as well. So we try to keep as only really the relevant data that's going to be useful. So if requests have a signal attached to them, then we're going to sample that. But of course, if it's an attack signal such as SQL injection, cross-site scripting, directory traversal, those types of attacks, then we do log all of those that we identify. Well, Kalen, this is really what I wanted to show off, being able to, again, I'll just kind of recap. We showed you how to discover some authentication related endpoints. We gave you the ability to add additional context for those authentication endpoints that we did discover via the login attempt, login success, and login failure signals. And then we showed actually how to mitigate some of those attacks using the Fastly bot management product to challenge those requests. to validate that, yes, they've completed a browser proof of work and can proceed on through the normal user workflow. Then we also talked about the J3 fingerprint and what that represents. Did I miss anything, Kaylin?
No, I think that's everything. I feel like with all of that information, you can protect yourself pretty well from the most common attacks. I know especially people running e-commerce sites are always running into problems where they're having their prices scraped, or even worse, they're having bots purchasing products as soon as they're released, so that actual customers can't get a hold of them. So, even though the demo that you showed today was authentication, you could apply this to pretty much any important endpoint that needs to be definitely run by humans and not other people. So yeah, thank you so much, Brooks. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap up?
Happy Friday again. And Kaylin, thank you so much for having me today.
Not a problem. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to our viewers as well for joining us today. We really appreciate it. We'd actually love to see you later on in June for a very special event. We're going to be going a little bit off of schedule, and we're going to be running an accompanying stream to our developer event happening in New York City. So we'd love to join you for that. We'll be back very soon, and enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.